Hello, welcome to the Talented Amateurs Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Randolph. This is the show where we shine a light on everyday people doing extraordinary things. The dreamers, the builders, and the go-getters who may not be household names, but whose stories and talents are worth celebrating. Today, we have David Neely with us. He is a financial services professional by day, and he is also a brand ambassador for Uncle Near's Whiskey by night. Today, we'll be discussing balancing the pivot as we dive into his work as brand ambassador while also balancing a busy life as a financial services professional. David, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Man, I'm doing good. How you doing, Joe?
Doing well, trying to ease into Saturday and really looking forward to talking with you and hearing your story. We've known each other for a while. And so I follow your journey and obviously know your background in financial services, but really I've enjoyed following you in your work and being an ambassador for Uncle Near's. But before that, even with some of the work you did curating events in Charlotte around whiskey and helping educate folks on how whiskey, the brands, how to enjoy it. And so really looking forward to hearing your stories today about the work that you've been doing there in the local community.
What I can say publicly, I will.
Perfect. And so before we get, maybe just give us a quick background of who you are and what you do. Just tell us about yourself.
Okay. My name's David Neely. I'm from Macon, Georgia. I'm in Georgia today, as a matter of fact. I live in Charlotte. My sister has a dog, a Yorkie, named Winston. So he's one of the most fascinating beings in my life these days. I refer to him as a 6-year-old delinquent. He's so cute, though. Great little fella. My job, what I do is I'm a financial services representative. My full-time role at the firm is I'm a brokerage director. So I do some financial planning on the side with my current clients, but my job really is to go out and recruit independent agents and advisors to promote our carriers and their solution pack. On the whiskey side of things, I'm a brand ambassador for an amazing company called the Uncle Near's organization, the Near Screen organization, rather. And I'm an executive bourbon steward. My fascination with whiskey is the story. Good whiskey does not exist without a good story. Just like in financial planning, people don't stick to their plan unless they understand why they're doing it. There's a story, there's a narrative that goes along with all of it, whether it be from an historical perspective, with their great-great-grandfathers and mothers passed down to them, and that drive, that urge to move them forward financially comes from within. Something similar happens with whiskey. What's in it? And that's what makes it taste good. Once you know what's in it and who's behind it, makes it taste even better. So I know that's who I am. That's what I do.
Love that. And then obviously I'm a Georgia boy myself from Hall County. And obviously we knew each other, met each other in Charlotte. We got a few things in common. Obviously, Alpha fraternity. We definitely share a common trait there. But let's start right here with you being an ambassador for one of the most celebrated whiskey brands in the world. That's not just your everyday job title or just everyday job. Like, how in the world did you land this gig?
I tell you, man, it happened. I was being interviewed without even realizing it. You mentioned that I've been around spirits for a while, and I developed a reputation, not just with people that I showed some bottles a few times on Instagram, but people in the industry. I had many opportunities to work with them, sit with them, learn. And so when the time came for Uncle Nearest to find an ambassador in the Carolinas, I wasn't aware, but they were. And my name came up in some industry conversations, and I just happened to reach out to the North Carolina manager at the time. We struck up a conversation, and I thought I was asking about an event, a sponsorship, and I was, but he was interviewing me. The answer to the event was no, but the opportunity to be an ambassador was yes. We probably talked about a month before I realized what was going on, what was being offered. And so when he told me about it, I was very enthused, very excited. I came down to two people and a decision maker. The thing that made the decision for them to choose me was a comment from someone who was already in the industry who recommended that I be the person they choose. So relationships matters. The role was not announced. It wasn't publicized. It was very much an inside job. I was an outsider to the company, but it was an inside the industry opportunity. Yeah.
Awesome. As you've been in this role, was there a single moment where you was like, how exactly, this is where I'm supposed to be? Was there a moment that as you've been doing this where you say, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be?
Yeah. And it's happened several times. I love history. I love connecting with people and telling stories. And so being able to be in a room where I can share the story with a relevant topic, be it DEI or human rights, the history of race relations in the Deep South, being able to express that in a room full of people where you're heard and where they connect, not just listen to you, but where they connect with the story and with themselves. And I tell you, that is always a great feeling when that happens. And so that just endears me to the industry and this role even more
Awesome.
every time it happens.
And Uncle Nearest isn't just a whiskey, it's history in a bottle. The story of Nearest Green is powerful.
Yeah.
And when you first heard it, what was your gut reaction?
Man, I was amazed. I was fortunate enough, you know how it is in Georgia. Growing up in Georgia in the 70s, they probably heard some racist things, saw some racist things. But there's this deep, complex algorithm where it isn't simply about race. It's about acceptance. And so without regard to race, in Deep South communities, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're accepted, everything's fine. Everybody gets along. And so when I heard the story about Nearest Green and Jack Daniel and how that relationship endured over the decades from the 1850s until his death in the 1880s, and how some of the families still to this very day work at the Jack Daniel organization, it was a familiar story that resonated with me. My neighbors, my parents' neighbors in Georgia, we're the same way. We're not all Black. We're not all white. We're mixed. And if you're cool, you're cool. You can borrow some sugar. You can borrow $20 or give $20 to your neighbor. And that was a story about being a neighbor. And that really resonated with me.
How do you keep the story fresh, alive? And when you're telling it for the 100th time to new people, how do you just keep it fresh?
But there's nothing new under the sun. And so what was old is new, what was new is old. And it's not difficult to reach into a headline, a current day headline, and tie it to the Nearest Green story. We can talk about pay disparity. We can talk about real estate investing. We can talk about taxes. We can talk about thievery. We can talk about marketing. You name it. This story has it's all enveloped in that story. It's one story, but it's a diamond. It's truly a diamond of the story. Just telling it and telling the story enthusiastically. I don't know. I want to smile about it because it just hits so many facets of life are involved in the Nearest Green story. It's an amazing story, and I don't think it gets old because of what it is. It's a human story.
Now,
And we are humans.
with you being in financial services, do you see any overlap in how you are talking and working with clients in the financial services field versus how you're talking with whiskey? What's that overlap like?
I tell you, it's again, the preacher, right? So I think about how well compensated Nearest Green was. He was highly paid by his mentee when he became the first master distiller of the Jack Daniel organization, the only person to ever make whiskey on the number 7 still. And how when he died, we don't know when he died, and we don't know where he died, but all we know is in 1884, he retired. He had a bunch of kids. Relating those facts to today, the stitch is emotional intelligence. And how do you respond to having a largesse, when you're not used to having much of anything? It's a very emotional response. And so when I talk to clients, sometimes if I'm fortunate enough to pick up on it, I'm able to relate that story. I mean, listen, here's a guy who didn't have anything. He was born into slavery. He made it big. He had a lot of money. There's a place in Lincoln County, Tennessee called COY Hill. And this is, a matter of fact, the Jack Daniel organization owns that property now. I want it. At any rate, Uncle Nearest owns that hill. But he went into bankruptcy and he lost it. Prime real estate. So when I talk to people about following their financial plans, now that you have discretionary income, at least 20% of that discretionary income is what we use to begin the financial plans. The reason they don't follow it is for emotional reasons. The problem is how you feel. You're thinking what you feel. And so I'm able to relate that story, and that's a huge overlap. And sometimes it clicks, and sometimes a couple of years in, something happened. My daughter, my son, my my lawnmower. Yeah.
Yeah. No, life happens. And so if we think about career, brand representation, you're almost like the ultimate storyteller or heart historian or hype person. So when you're out there representing Uncle Nearest, how do you hook people in right from the first minute?
It's for me, the tasting begins when I walk into the room, not when I start talking about the whiskey. When I walk into the room and I'm meeting people, I'm greeting people, asking about who they are, why they're there, do they drink whiskey? And sometimes they're like, no, I don't drink any whiskey. And I'm like, don't worry about it. I got a vice for you. I'll share my vices with you. Being able to relate what's happening in the room real time currently, weaving that into the story is a great way to connect with people the way I do it. And to make sure that, and being able to call names, it's storytelling.
Yeah.
Joe and I were talking the other day, and Kate was very concerned about what's happening in the markets and what's going on. He's mentoring some folks. And so Uncle Nearest mentored Jack. And he was a great guy. And turned out he was 10 when they were 7 when they met. And when he was 10, they perfected Uncle Nearest, the Lincoln County process. So now Joe is part of the story. And so that's one of the main ways I connect with people during the events.
Awesome. Now, whiskey fans they can be a little passionate about their whiskey or their bourbon of choice. How do you win people over or a tough crowd over or someone who thinks they've tried it all?
Tell you, we call those folks taters, Taters.
Taters.
And
Okay.
I was talking to a guy by the name of Keith Hayes. And I proudly told Keith, I said, listen, man, cocktails off a punk, buy better whiskey. I say this, and Keith is from California, big, tall guy. And he just looks at me and he groans. Oh, don't say that. There's nothing wrong with a good old fashioned. I love old fashions, Boulevardier, Gold Rushes, Manhattan revolvers. I'm into it now. Taters say things like, buy better whiskey. You can't really win a tater over through conversation. You gotta give that guy a great cocktail. You gotta give that woman a nice whiskey that does not make her epiglottis curl up and choke while she's trying to swallow it. You gotta show them how to taste and nose and use his ENT to experience the vapors of the whiskey during the tasting. That's what gets a tater. There ain't no talking to those people. Most of them. They have to experience it for themselves.
For sure. Has anyone ever just completely changed their mind after you poured them a glass and told them the story?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It happens often when I show the way I like to taste whiskey. It's not just, it's a physiological process that I like to walk folks through where you slow down. The whiskey is meant to be drank slow. I tell people if you have an emotional problem, you can shoot it. Problem still be there in the morning. You're going to sleep like hell and you're going to pass out, but the problem still be in the morning. If you really want to get into whiskey, you got to slow down, take your time and breathe through it. And that's what gets people. It's the technique. So I've seen it happen dozens of times, whether they're sitting or standing, but especially if we're in a group and they get the opportunity to taste the whiskey, man, it really does change perspective.
Now, maybe following up on that, how should we experience and enjoy whiskey and how do you drink your whiskey?
If it's a new whiskey, right, in my tasting process, because your nasal passages are occluded, one or the other at some point at any given time. And this is high proof alcohol. Those little VOCs, volatile organic compounds popping off the surface of the alcohol can singe the nerve endings in your nose, which renders you unable to smell. If you can't smell, you can't taste. I do not recommend for tasting whiskey. You can do this with wine. It's a lower proof. But for tasting whiskey, don't do that. Instead, I recommend you go at an angle to isolate your nasal passages and then begin to evoke a memory of what's in your pantry while you nose it. So you're nosing, you're inhaling, walking through your pantry, and you're looking at the herbs and the spices. And maybe there's some cinnamon there, some cloves. Maybe over there's some smoked paprika. Maybe you're a gardener and you've got some mint hanging, drying, or some sage drying. And so you're engaging your scent memory. Then I recommend people take 3 sips and that you inhale for each sip and don't exhale until after you swallow. The first sip, very small, goes over the tongue and back teeth and swallow. This is what I like to call the taste sip. This is you're going to get the tongue involved. And whatever it's sweet or stinging, I'm sorry, not sweet or astringent or sour or whatever, there's something savory going on. This is where you get that. The second sip goes over the tongue to the soft upper palate. That's what I call the sensation sip, because some of the vapors come up into behind your nasal passage, up into the throat, and then you exhale. And the third sip puts all that together. It's the biggest sip of the 3. It's almost like mouthwash. So it goes around your mouth, hits your cheeks, washes over your teeth. You swallow after you push some of the whiskey up to your soft upper palate, and that's when the vapors fill your head. And it's just a quick little hit. And it's all about using your physiology to get into the whiskey. And then when you think about the science and the art that goes behind picking a single barrel like this bottle here, and how over time, how consistent yet different those picks are, alchemy, it's science and art all together. And unless you're sipping and tasting, you don't get to appreciate it. But if you're drinking, fine, go ahead and drink.
No, I hear the passion, and I think I might need a drink later today just based on how you described that. And one thing I did hear is like mouthwash. So when I tell my dentist, hey, I've been drinking more whiskey because it's good for my dental hygiene. So I'm gonna definitely.
I'll write your note.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, and right after my name, I'm gonna write snake oil salesman.
Now, part of what you do is building community and building partnerships. And when you think about some of the work that you've done, what's been the most fun or meaningful event you've been a part of as an ambassador?
Yeah, so I'm going to call her name out. Maddie Gaines Finch curated a Roaring 20s event that I was part of in Charlotte at a local cigar bar there. So people came, they were dressed up in 20s gear. I had on the spats. Of course, I take the green jacket out. We drink it. And it was a Roaring 20s event. I think it was spring of, was that 24? I think it was spring of 23.
Okay.
And it was a lot of fun, beautiful people everywhere. It was a mid-spring day, so the temperature was just right. Sun was out, music, people were singing. It was a really good time. A really good time. I think it was supposed to last from like 2 to 6. I don't think I left till 10. A lot of fun that day. Yeah.
Okay. When you have an event, like what's the vibe you want people to walk away with after an entrepreneur's event?
First thing I'd like for people to walk away with is a better sense of the story. Often, not all the time, but often it's not uncommon for people to think that there was some kind of theft involved where Jack Daniels stole, and by the way, there's no S on the end of Daniel, it's just Jack Daniels, that he stole a recipe from Uncle Nearest. That isn't accurate. That Jack Daniel, that isn't accurate. So we want to make sure that they have the story right, because people, I found, own the story. I'm an ambassador.
Right.
And now when people want to tell me the Uncle Nearest story, I just didn't listen. Now, if they get something off, then I chime in then. And a lot of people love the story because it's an inspirational story. It's just a story of not just surviving, because Uncle Nearest did survive slavery. He was born into it somewhere around 1820. But the man thrived. And so did Jack, by the way. Jack was kicked out of his house as a kid when he was 7 years old. In spite of Jack going to fight to keep people like Uncle Nearest in slavery, they found a way to come together. So when people leave, I want them to get the story right and to develop a sense of community. Bourbon drinkers, Scotch drinkers too, including Japanese whiskey people. I know that's not Scotch. I don't mean to offend any Japanese whiskey purists.
All right.
But us whiskey drinkers, there is a great community. Even if all you do is drink Irish whiskey or you have a fascination with Indian whiskey, there's a great sense of community. When you leave an Uncle Nearest tasting, I'd like you to have that doorway into the community and understand that it begins with a lot of self-acceptance. You got to accept who you are in order to have something to give. In order to be able to give community, you got to accept who you are. Can't give what you don't have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the brand honors a legacy while staying fresh and modern. How do you keep the balance without losing either side of the story?
Again, I go back to Ecclesiastes, the riffing off Solomon. They think it was Solomon, and how he said there's nothing new under the sun. And so we get to connect. A lot of us, as African Americans particularly, don't we don't know much about who we are beyond a second or maybe third great grandparent. And some not even that far back. So keeping the story new, I think, means helping to people to connect to their past.
Hmm.
American rockets that would have to slingshot around the moon, and once they hit the apogee, slingshot back to Earth.
Right.
I think sometimes going to the past can inspire you, move you forward faster than you would have otherwise gone, because now you've got a reason. Now you know where you come from. And for some of us, that's new. It's foundational. So being able
Sure.
to say, you know what, listen, it isn't just me who had great relationships with my white neighbors, and we borrowed and hung out and came to parties, and they brought over cups when it was during times of mourning and water and food. Other people did that too. That's America. That's humanity. So being able to reach back into the past and say, hey, this thing is not new. You're not alone. We all do this as humans. I think helps us connect and gets us back into that sense of community.
Awesome. Now, do you find where you see younger audiences or where they may connect different to the story than maybe older ones?
Yeah, man. Young audiences, they're still drinking clear spirits,
Yes.
not
Okay.
moonshine. They still
Right.
love vodka. No offense, vodka lovers. I
Yes.
academically don't understand why we're doing that. Just drink gin. It can't be
Right.
something,
Just
you
drink
know.
gin.
Uh,
Okay.
it's got a little something going on. This tasteless, colorless, you're killing me. But a lot of younger folks, they like that. It's a different chemical altogether, so you feel different from drinking vodka or tequila or gin than you do if you're drinking brown spirits or aged spirits like that. I don't get a lot of under 40s in the room.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah,
Do you
more whiskey for me.
you mentioned cigars earlier. Do you think it's a correlation between the older audiences and how they drink whiskey? Because we tend to navigate to maybe cigars as we get older. One, it's not just necessarily for the smoking, but it's more so for the social aspect of it. When you go enjoying a cigar, you're probably sitting for an hour, 2 hours. And if you got a community of folks that you're talking with, you have that along with your whiskey. Do you see that correlation as you mentioned the cigar event you talked about earlier?
Yeah, I think the cigar community is just as, if not more communal than the whiskey community. Those groups travel. They
They do.
travel across the country to major cities, whether it's Kansas City or Pensacola, Florida, or Charlotte or Atlanta or wherever. They travel and they hang out with each other. They'll be in Maryland, and they know each other. It's very difficult to get somebody to travel, heck, even from Atlanta to Swanee or to Macon, just to share a bottle of Maker's Mark. But if I'm going to have an event where the cigar guy is coming in and he's going to be rolling cigars and showing you how to toast the foot and explaining the difference between the contents of his cigar, people flock to that. So they're very communal group of people too. Because I do think they enjoy good whiskey. My opinion is that cigars pair better with whiskey cocktails than straight whiskey, because I think the flavors are too powerful unless, like, my palate is relatively dull. I'm nose blind to charcoal. I can't taste it. And rarely am I able to taste smoke in a bourbon. I can certainly taste it in scotch, but not in a bourbon. Some people pick that stuff out. And so if you are smoking a cigar and all the smoke is in the air, and like I said earlier, the art of tasting whiskey begins with nosing it. To me, this is overwhelming. So I would rather focus on the more intense flavors in a whiskey cocktail that pair with what's happening midway through a cigar smoke than to go straight ahead with straight whiskey pours and cigar pours. That's just me.
Okay. Very good. No, thanks for sharing that. And as we start thinking about the future and that vision for the future, what's got you most fired up in your role? Any big moves or projects you have on the horizon?
Not right now. I'm beating the drum. I'm like Maceo in James Brown's band. Just let me hit the drums, man. That's all I want to do. I ain't got to be out front. I'm content with bringing people together in events. No special kind of crazy event. I would love to do something like I mentioned earlier, whether it's with whiskey or rum, one of my other favorite spirits. I'm a whiskey, rum, gin guy. Whether it's a rum garden party or something like that, that could be fun. But I'm still going to be very much event focused, and for as I can tell in the near future.
Okay. The spirits industry does move fast. And so what do you see Uncle Near shaking things up next?
Yeah.
Cognac. Tell us more.
Cognac, there's a vodka brand also on the shelf right now, but cognac and bourbon have a very intertwined history. There is no bourbon without cognac.
Mm.
Somewhere around the late 1400s, 15th century, the Dutch, as usual, were a part of the story. They were coming around into the Mediterranean, shipping cognac wine back to the Netherlands. They were taking what's called Limousin oak. There's the French oak tree.
Okay.
And they were making containers to ship wine back to the Netherlands. And by the time they got there, they noticed the wine looked and tasted different. And this is because of the aging process and the natural interaction between the wine and the barrel. But thus, cognac, the spirit, is born. When they got over to the U.S., the French, they were on the west side of the Mississippi. Basil Hayden and his friends, Evan Williams and his friends, were shipping whiskey out of Kentucky down the Mississippi River. They were going to the Ohio River, connecting to the Mississippi, and selling it down to Louisiana in New Orleans. Their French friends helped them with logistics. Sometimes you had to use an old barrel. And if you had hogsheads or nails or whatever in there, it didn't taste so good. Your whiskey didn't taste so good. So how do you clean the barrel out? You burn the inside. And then you put your whiskey in there. You knock off the char, and you put your whiskey in there, and you send it downriver.
You just never know how much of the nuances goes into making spirits, even wine. Just the small details. It's all what could shift the way it tastes and how you experience that. And one of the questions I do have, when you think about the trends in whiskey culture, what are some of the things you see that may just be getting started? Can you start to look at some of those trends?
What trends in whiskey culture? I do see, which is weird to me, a lot of what I consider to be excessive hoarding and sales on the secondary market. A great bottle of whiskey comes out, and there are more and more people see whiskey bottles as a way to invest and store their money, save their money, because of some notion that the bottle will appreciate in value. And that does happen sometimes. We saw a lot of it happening during COVID. People going out and buying nice bottles of whiskey. Sometimes they drink it and they say, oh my goodness, I drank all my good whiskey. And now they're going and buying 2 or 3 bottles. Some of those bottles became restricted and distribution became less broad. Some of those bottles still sitting on people's shelves. Elmo T. Lee was one. A great whiskey, the original single barrel whiskey. Blanton's is another one that saw a benefit from people hoarding, and the prices went up. It's still a great bottle of whiskey. Love the horses and love the story and all the stuff behind it. I just don't think a single bottle is worth $120. So I think hoarding is a trend, not one that I really like, but I do see that as a trend.
Okay, interesting. I would have thought that. One of the questions, if I think about just if someone was listening today and they wanted to step into brand ambassadorship or just learn how to connect people through storytelling. I think you do a great job of storytelling. Ever since I've known you, you were able to tell great stories, no matter the topic. And I think a lot of people aspire to be able to tell great stories because I think it plays out in a multitude of ways, whether you're selling whiskey, whether you are driving a certain business at your company where you need to be able to understand the art of storytelling to be able to really hone in. What is one thing they should start to do tomorrow if they wanted to just be not only just an ambassador, but just a better storyteller?
A better storyteller. One, I think that's interesting because you can go to different schools, classes. You can get on AI, whether it's Copilot or chat, and figure out the anatomy of a good story.
Yep.
You got to have a point, a zinger, a conclusion you want people to come to. The art of yes, and get people shaking their heads 3 times, and then boom, you got them, right?
Yep.
I think develop a sense of high energy.
Okay.
I'm an introvert a lot of times. Unless I'm on stage, unless I got the mic, I'm good. To find something that you're passionate about to do that. And it could be, you could be passionate about people, you could be passionate about history, world history, whatever. But to tell a good story, I think you need to be passionate about the subject and tie it back to yourself some way. It's not about being selfish, it's about finding a place to share from in order to tell the story. Other than looking up the anatomy of a good story, find something that you like about you and come from that place all the time when you tell the story. Something about you makes you happy, weave that into the story. You like the way you look when you smile, freaking smile when you tell the story.
Yeah.
It'll translate.
No, I love that. And I think storytelling is one of those things where you can go get trained on kind of the structure of a story. There's also a certain it factor that allows a story to come to life. I always find people that are able to tell great stories. They're always into something, right? They always have a story about something. There's a certain innate thing that certain people have that makes them great stories that make you feel like you're sitting in a room or was there with them when it happened. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a balance of the structure of it, but then also figure out what the passion is that you have to allow you to connect with what you're talking about. So people then connect to that so they can see themselves in your shoes. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we're getting to the end as we wrap up. And when we look at one of the things I always like to end the podcast with is throughout this conversation, if they don't remember anything, what would be 3 things that you would want the audience to walk away with at the conclusion of this podcast, whether it's around whiskey drinkers or not, right? What are 3 things you want to leave us with today?
Yeah. Good question. Okay. Audre Lorde, African-American essayist, poet, feminist, philosopher. One of her remarks is that she believed that self-care is not self-indulgence. In fact, it's self-preservation. And that in and of itself is an act of political warfare. So I would say takeaway number 1, get to know you. That makes you into a rebel in some folks' eyes. They would rather control you. And if you don't possess yourself, if Uncle Nearest did not possess himself, when that young man that he mentored had been mentoring since age 7, after 1864, that young man approaches him and says, "Hey, I want to hire you and pay you to do what you've been doing and be my master distiller." If Uncle Nearest did not possess himself, he probably would have said no. And we wouldn't have the story today. We wouldn't have the legacy today. It was a very strong political statement to possess yourself, get to know you, accept you, warts and all. Once you love yourself, you can love other people. You cannot give what you do not have. So love yourself. And the second point, second takeaway, connects to the first. Form community. Look for community, relationships. When my parents passed earlier this year, I was just, I knew they knew a lot of people, but I was just so amazed at how many people came around, not just to share, but they came to share. My parents gave a lot of love, and the community gave that back to them. So love and accept yourself, have that to give. And when you share that, you form community. And the third takeaway I'd say is enjoy your whiskey. Slow down. It's in the glass. It'll be there. You do not have to run through it. If you have an emotional problem, you need to take the edge off. Whiskey is not the answer for that. But if you have a moment or two as you ponder and reflect on who you are in the community that you've formed and a part of, enjoy a glass of whiskey with that. And let the vapors fill your ENT. That's a good time. Give that away. Yeah. Those are my 2 takeaways.
Awesome. Now, thank you for
So,
sharing it. I think we can all resonate with those 3
yeah.
takeaways. So thank you for sharing it. So as we wrap up today, first, I want to thank you for joining the podcast today. I really enjoyed the story. Obviously, we know the history of, and understanding the history of Uncle Nearest, but thank you for just being able to pull and bring that to light for us so we can continue to educate ourselves around the rich history of Uncle Nearest, but also making us better and more prepared whiskey drinkers and understanding how to consume, how to enjoy a good whiskey, and then obviously the art of storytelling around it. So thank you for joining today. And for the audience, thank you guys for tuning in. Please enjoy the podcast. Let us know your thoughts and feedback